So my name is Patti Vardami. I am part of a program called Burning Athens, which I run together with my partner and friend Yorgos Papadopoulos. Burning Athens is a program of events and residencies for visual and sound artists, for writers and for curators. It's recently founded, and then we have based it in Athens. This time we have with us Rosemary Lee, who's been with us for a month and a half. And I'll say a few words about Rosemary. She's a media artist and theorist. She was born in the United States in Rhode Island. She has graduated from the BFA at the School of Arts Institute of Chicago and an MA at the European Graduate School. Her work crosses between disciplines of philosophy, art, science, economics, politics, poetry, and music. She has shown work in the United States, in France, in Spain, and in Germany. She has recently been shortlisted for the Frank Villa Prize and is also collaborating with the Experimental Media Lab Science Friction in Copenhagen. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Kunsthalle Athens very much for hosting us for the political speeches series. I would like to thank a friend and collaborator, Christos Mikas. And I think we're ready to start the presentation, where Rosemary is going to talk about the work that she was inspired during the residency program with us, and then afterwards we can have a session of questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Patti. So I guess with that introduction is something that's a bit important about my work is that it's very interdisciplinary, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell projects of mine are from the same person because they really span different fields, disciplines, and interests. So what I'm working on right now are two parallel projects that they're interrelated, but sometimes they kind of go off in different directions. So I'm going to start with the theoretical portion, which I began developing for a conference that I was speaking at called Pedagogies of Disaster in Tyranny, Albania, which was occurring last month. And then I've kind of continued working on this because the paper that I delivered was actually a collaboration with Yorgos Papadopoulos. So it deals mainly with these, what I see as very conflicting and like battling notions of free, beginning with the two directions that it mainly goes off in for me are the political and the economic. So I guess this starting image, it's more than just like a pretty image to begin with the talk with. I was kind of ruminating on this free and trying to find a way to visualize it, and I really like mining garbage from the internet, so this is kind of what ended up transpiring out of that. So the whole presentation is actually employing programs and imagery that I've mined from the internet for free. So like the degradation of quality is actually very, very crucial to the concept. So yeah, I guess with that, I find it very important to my work using copyleft practices and looking at free as a word divided from itself. That it's one word in English that comes to contain a lot of different meanings that are very often fighting. So the most commonly used one is the one in economic terms, and very complicit with this like capitalist notion of like using free as a lure to actually just produce sales and produce capital. And then there's the other sense of political freedom or liberty. So for these to be held within one word, I thought was quite suspicious. But when I started researching a little bit more, I found out that actually the first instance of the word, a word that translates to freedom, comes from amagi or amargi in Sumerian, and it originally meant return to mother, or in the same sense, freedom from debt peonage, that you're free so you can go home. So this has been embraced by libertarians and I guess like classic liberals. In this sense of the word, economic and civil freedom are conjoined. But in English, the etymological origins are actually they're somewhat similar, but it means closer to beloved, or one that is free from foreign rule, which is somewhat interrelated. But free of charge actually entered into the English language in the 1580s, which was contemporaneous with the emergence of capitalism. So I find that pretty interesting that like this divide actually it originates in capitalism. So from that maybe we can into why this divide is so indicative for that. If it did indeed originate as freedom from economic slavery, it certainly has taken on other connotations, and I see this as a theft of the word free by capitalism or capitalists, effectively severing the notion of individual freedom from economic freedom to produce a free which is not really free. So Hannah Arendt put this really beautifully, that divorcing the notion of freedom from politics, one arrives at a formulation through which one may be a slave in the world and still be free. So perhaps this can be an indicator of like how this fake free can be very instrumental for capitalism, and I guess this compatibility draws from the possibility to create exponential accumulation at zero price. So taking X to be a commodity, so the hamburger being a commodity, setting the price to zero, you can acquire as many items as you wish, but still there's a flat line for the cost. Essentially, the capitalist does not pay for what he buys. Capitalism does not actually account for the real costs of what are entailed within this economic system. And I think this is really beautifully illustrated in this iceberg metaphor, where the product price is what one can kind of interact with, and like you can put a number on it, but the environmental impact, the labor cost, and a lot of these long-term and like difficult to quantify things are like hidden beneath.
Can you read them to us, because we can't really tell.
Okay, so the environmental impact, labor cost, scrap cost, consumer perception, unplanned downtime, risk management and safety, warranty cost, cost of field failure, training and education, inspection costs, and replacement costs. So this is mainly for products or like, I think this is, or machinery, manufacturing. It seems like this is kind of specifically geared toward that. But it essentially it illustrates this rather well that the actual costs are often hidden and that the price or the number that is put on a thing is not really telling the whole story. This is an ad that I found very resonant with that, not only because it deals with icebergs, but because there's this kind of love for making communal the costs of things, but then privatizing the profit. So within capitalist systems, so there are these companies that want to melt icebergs and then sell the water. And so this is one company that like thinks this is a very good idea. And I came across a couple of other ones where they're melting icebergs and then selling it in very, very fancy recyclable bottles. And then kind of making notes about what they think about the environment. So I just find these as very interesting phenomena that taking something that is free and naturally occurring and like ideally belongs to the planet and like all inhabitants of this planet and not these guys who have this company, but then they're profiting off of it. So yeah, something about this form of free is that it generally it uses free as like a lure, as I said before, and then places the actual costs in the margins and where there's a lack of visibility. So this tends to be actually placing the cost of this free upon the shoulders of the unfree and those who are already subject to economic slavery or environmental degradation, all of the social and environmental costs of capitalism. So another form of these costs is the visual pollution that is entailed in. Often when one accepts something for free, you bear the cost of having the annoyance of advertising and or delays or like lack of quality when you're dealing in internet terms. Gmail is a very interesting example of this because they actually use the content of your that they use the content of their users' correspondence in order to better advertise to them. And so this kind of data mining is occurring in many different forms and like anytime you use your credit card, you're being subject to data mining and your statistics becoming part of, I guess, like statistics to better market to you and like sell you more. So I find this fairly interesting, just the way that these free programs actually profit from or the individual users use. And with that, I think Gmail or Google in general is a very good segue into surveillance. That your data doesn't really belong to you, and especially in the sense of like when you're using these kinds of programs, and in general the internet is subject to a kind of surveillance. So these would be things that I see as like challenges to the actual free, or like one's political freedom, particularly within media. So with surveillance often it comes hand in hand with censorship. And I think this map is kind of interesting because there are very few places that are not subject to censorship of some kind in the internet. But the places which are listed as literal or no censorship, I really don't actually believe that's an accurate indicator of what's happening. This is a screen that I'm particularly familiar with living in Germany, that YouTube is essentially blocked. Anything that has any copyrighted or like any music or any culture pretty much is blocked by GEMA, which is this entity that controls the rights for media in Germany. But GEMA also has the ability to block things that they don't have the rights for. They kind of have this like free pass to just block anything that they feel like blocking, and then try to charge artists, musical artists, video artists, anybody in order to like profit from work that they don't even own the rights for. Having been here during the situation that has occurred at ERT, it has been somewhat strange to me to see what's happening there, especially in relation to this privatization of public property or public goods or entities, and for me it has been heartening to see how much people fought for it. I don't know how that is going to really go in the end, but at least for me it has been meaningful to see. But so with that, I actually started just playing around, and I'm potentially going to make a work from this, but right now I'm just in the experimental phase. But I made a little GIF of the last moments of like before the TV was shut off, and then this like flickering that was occurring, going from programming into static. Because I think of it as kind of an indicator of like potentially very, very negative change. This is more garbage that I took mine from the internet, but I thought this was a really funny ad for a free pig who's clearly not very free, and that the pig is being given away because it eats too much, but he would be very good for cooking, and that he's kind of being sold off in this very, very pathetic, very sad way on Craigslist. So the open access movement has come up with their own answer to the problem of the word free. And for that, this is gratis and libre. But their terms, in my opinion, don't arrive at a solution for the larger problems of free. But gratis is meant to pertain to being able to access and use code without a price barrier, and libre pertains to being allowed to modify and reuse code without a permission of the creator. But what I refer to here is the tyranny of the free, the creation of a free which is not free. This research was begun in hopes of disentangling the word free from itself, only to find that it has been a bit ensnarled from the beginning. Freedom of the individual inherently tied to the freedom from death. In the end, having come no closer to a resolution than before, I should mention before going any further on, that I say free without knowing any longer what it means. That is to say that free is frequently said without knowing what it means, without meaning what it means. I know free, in a sense, beyond the word. I know free when I think and live it through actions, through movement. When I give without asking in return, or receive acts of kindness, never expecting repayment. I know free at border crossings into countries whose nationals are barred or inhibited from entering the country I was born in. And I know free when I enjoy things upon which a price cannot be placed. I often know free by what it is not, and those instances abound. Coming face to face with its inverse, I know viscerally the meanings of free. To end with that, I have two quotes. The individual was promised the satisfaction of her ever-expanding desires by capitalism, which in turn are defined by and define the absolute freedom of the individual. When this fairy tale comes up against the harsh reality of the decline of capitalism and the consequent inability of this world to satisfy their desires, a certain nihilist individualism is produced. As history proved that the Enlightenment project resulted solely in nightmares, and so, the only remaining option, or genuinely free individuals, is to exercise their freedom to destroy the totality of the world. So I see this as like a very dangerous substitution of conflating meanings within one word and then using them interchangeably, and then using this word actually to produce desires that cannot be fulfilled. Mikhail Bakunin had a very nice ending for this. I am truly free when all human beings, men and women, are equally free. The freedom of other men, far from negating or limiting my freedom, is, on the contrary, its necessary premise and confirmation. The freedom of all is essential to my freedom. So in my artistic practice, in a somewhat related investigation that has kind of taken a segue from intellectual freedom and then back into it, it's led me to think quite a bit about overwriting this read-write dichotomy that I think is perhaps even more problematized by the open access libre gratis divide, but also confronting censorship and thinking about the ability for information to kind of override these problematic situations that we have. Freedom of access to information being one issue, but also a battle for meaning being another very important one. So this has led me to develop a project. I was invited to do a show in Copenhagen at a space called Science Fiction. So it's an experimental lab for art and science, bringing them together. And so when I was invited to start working with them, we started talking about the idea of the anarchive. What is anarchival? And for me, this is kind of an interesting concept to think about, like, that the general tendency these days is just to accumulate everything. And this goes for information as much as money, capital, everything. Commodities in general. So what happens when you burn the archive, or what happens when you destroy information? And I was living at the time very close to the site of the 1933 Bücherverbrennung in Germany. This was a really atrocious situation. Actually, the Nazi student group were burning like mass amounts of books that were considered to have un-German themes. So this act of censorship and like living in such close proximity to it really was kind of pushing me to work with books and like the burning book as a symbol, not only for censorship, but also for books that burn in the sense of like living beyond being burned. That the majority of the books that were burned in 1933 in that square were actually immortalized by this act, attempting to silence their authors, often Jewish or politically engaged, but not even necessarily that. They were even burning gratis. So I figured out a way that you can produce a speaker, like planar speakers, just from running an electric current, like an alternating current, through any surface with a copper coil. So I started making these books that are radio transmitters and receivers, and so I have this one here that is a radio, but I think I'm going to also expand this to like other forms of sound transmitters. But I guess to just do a little experiment, which I'm not sure will necessarily work, I'd like to show the sound from this, because it's not only like a pretty object, it makes Okay, my input is out. I was hoping I could amplify this more, but so you kind of get the idea that but eventually I would intend for this to be a whole library of books that will be some transmitting their own like pirate radio stations, and then the others receiving them. So I think of this as kind of an exercise in freedom to remind us that we are actually responsible for the the means and the orchestration of the media that we produce and consume. So with that, I feel like that covers what
Maybe I could start the questions by asking, trying to make a parallel between your objects and your quest to meaning free. The way that I had understood your object you made, the transcription that you made from a book to the sound objects, trying to pay homage to the censorship of the burning of the books. Have you arrived to such a point with the term of free? Is there a space or a point that you have arrived as far as this theft of the term as free or this unjust justice to the term of free has been done? Have you arrived to any such? I mean, where did your quest to looking into the notion of the term free arrive into? Μετάφραση πριν πατρίσει. Γεια σου.
Where did it originate, or
no, where
has it? And
but I need to translate for a moment. So, η ερώτηση μου ήταν σε σχέση με το να τραβήξουμε, αν γίνεται αν μπορέσουμε να κάνουμε κάποιο παραλληλισμό μεταξύ του αντικειμένου που έχει φτιάξει η Rosemary με το βιβλίο στο να Η ερώτηση ήταν σε σχέση με το αν μπορούμε να τραβήξουμε να φτιάξουμε κάποιο παραλληλισμό σε σχέση με το βιβλίο, το αντικείμενο που έχει φτιάξει η Rosemary, ώστε να μεταφέρει το βιβλίο σε ένα αντικείμενο ήχου, αν έχει έρθει σε κάποιο σημείο ή αποτέλεσμα η έρευνά της σε σχέση με την έννοια της λέξης free. Και αυτή η έρευνα, εάν έφτασε σε κάποιο transgressive ή σε κάποια μεταφορά, όπως έφτασε το βιβλίο σε ένα αντικείμενο ήχου. Σκέφτηκα αν μπορεί να υπάρχει κάποιος παραλληλισμός σε σχέση με τις δύο αυτές γραμμές έρευνας που έκανε.
I think that I've kind of arrived at understanding the capitalistic notion of free, but I don't think I've arrived at a solution. So, in a way, I feel like the more time I spend looking at it, the less I understand it, which could maybe just be true of research in general, or my research in general. I think I've become aware of this general internalized version of free that this like neoliberal and like capitalistic sense has produced, that the individual sovereignty actually overrides the sovereignty of all others, and that it's this like tremendously destructive freedom, and it's totally divorced from the social fabric, so like not acknowledging the costs of one's freedom. I think that's tremendously dangerous. But beyond that, I feel like maybe it's still too early for me to kind of give a conclusion to where this is ending up. Maybe it doesn't have a conclusion. Are there any other?
Well, okay, I'll make a comment. Have you thought about what do you think? What have you been thinking about reciprocity? You've thought about reciprocity at all? Because it seems like to me, like the one common thread is like a kind of a absence of obligation. You know, like I don't have to pay for this, and like, or I don't have to be accountable, and like, the accountability and reciprocity of like giving back of what you take It's kind of like, to me, like the neoliberal idea is basically like there's some people that are in our system of exchange and there are people that are outside of our system of exchange, right? And that basically is the border of like this division of society, that you don't actually have to be a part of that system.
Yeah, I feel like I have a little bit conflicting views on that. I see that like there, I guess within a capitalist system there are times when it's designated that there is an outside, and then there are times when it's designated that there is no outside and everything is within this, and that everything is immanent and has been eaten by capitalism. And I don't know, maybe I'm just going through a transitional phase of like not really knowing which one is applicable and which one is really reflective of the actual situation. But yeah, reciprocity is something that I find really, really applicable to this. But something, I was speaking about reciprocity with somebody the other day, and she mentioned that actually something that even mentioned, this, like, my ability, just because of my nationality, being able to go to places where people from some of the countries where I've been really are barred from entering the United States.
Your nationality is U.S.?
Yeah. Or it's at least made very, very difficult. And countries like Bolivia, Brazil, they have reciprocity measures, and I'm actually in favor of those. I like, in general, I think like it's kind of a good thing for it to be harder for U.S. nationals to be able to enter those countries and like at least send the message of that this is what's happening to the citizens of these marginalized countries. So I don't know. There perhaps positive and negative sides to reciprocity, but in general, I think it is a very good thing to think about.
Εάν θέλετε να ρωτήσετε κάτι στα ελληνικά, μπορούμε να το μεταφράσουμε. I was just saying that if someone wants to ask something in Greek, maybe we can. But do you want to be like have a better listen to
about the objects that you combine? Like, have you binded other kinds of objects together? Maybe, I mean, the whole scientific, structure that you create.
Yeah, a lot of, actually this has a foundation in kind of an ongoing project that I've been working on for the past 2 years called Misuse of Media. And so I'm often taking technological devices and then using them in the wrong way in order to find something different. And so this is based off of a lecture that Jojo Gambin gave, and he was talking about this concept of liturgy and this like belief in that technology will just work and we don't have to understand how it works, but we just have to believe in it, and like so he's dealing with it more in this like dealing with Catholicism, but then applying it to technology. So that's something that I find really interesting is like moving away from just believing that our devices will do what we tell them to do, and actually understanding what's inside of it and giving ourselves the license to destroy them, to fix them instead of throwing them away.
Free technologies, actually. You are freeing, in a sense, the actual...
Yeah, in a way, yeah, like the liberation of the radio. Yeah, in a sense. So yeah, some projects I've done in the past. Maybe I have some examples of just like past. Past projects is this. I made a record player that produces drawings. So. And like producing these very abstract expressionistic drawings from a piece of technology. So here's the device itself. But yeah, so that's a like a common thread in my work is to like mess with technology and a little bit like reclaim it and to say like you should be actually owning this instead of just being oppressed by like what's thrust upon you. And I think also like within the internet, I think this is like very, very, very pertinent to like fighting for your rights within this space that is kind of quickly closing. And often by the same ones who like already control the like terrestrial rights.
Because this corresponds to the whole social networks and freedom of these networks and how the whole system of the internet works.
So yeah, that's and for. This is also, I guess this is kind of turning into another series that I'm working on called Datenträger, which means like basically storage, like data storage things. So like CDs, DVDs, MP3 players, anything that holds data in some way, or cassette tape. And just thinking about how we store data, what does it mean to store it, like what. And who controls that, and is this obsessive accumulation and like saving of data actually potentially problematic? Because it becomes oppressive actually that we're kind of obliged to save everything and get bigger hard drives and buy more CDs or DVDs to store all of it, and then upload it as well to Flickr or YouTube or Facebook, and then these companies actually just using it for profit. So these are all kind of interrelated issues for me.
Could you talk to us a little bit more about what's behind your very wide range of media in your work and the cross-disciplinary practices, and what does it mean to you?
Okay.
And maybe you can talk about any kind of project that you'd like to share with us about the purpose of it, or what is it you find really interesting and intriguing to like intellectually driving for you.
Yeah, I think that's actually very important. That when I graduated with my undergraduate from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I went into it with a painting background, and then I was given this like open potentiality that there were no majors, there were no specializations, so I ended up studying in every department in the school except for architecture and graphic design, and like really I kind of was trying to lose myself in just do everything, taste everything, and like throwing myself into departments that I totally hated and knew I hated them from the beginning, but like needed to like make sure what I thought about. And just to like experiment and see what happens from doing things you never really anticipated doing. So that quickly drew me out of painting, and I kind of recognized that I'm more of a sculptor. I really like objects, and then as a thinker, I think I still think very sculpturally. I think through objects and structures. So things that are not perhaps visually similar for me are very interrelated on just a structural level. So sometimes that is what unites projects of mine that seem unrelated to other people. This PDF that I was showing earlier is from my last exhibition, and it maybe I can. People actually asked me, and sometimes this happens, actually every time I've had a solo exhibition, people ask me if it's a group show, because it seems like so schizophrenic that it must be different people who have made the work. So in this show alone, I was doing prints, drawings, found objects, installation, photography, just like street photography, kinetic sculptures, which these are kind of motorized pieces. And then this kind of has a drawback to like my background in painting, dealing with like the drawings that the drawing machine produced were very visually pleasing. And a wall painting. So yeah, interdisciplinarity is extremely important to my work, and something that's sometimes a continual challenge to fight for and be able to explain myself that like, no, I'm not just schizophrenic, like these things have relationships, but they're not immediately apparent, or like really going with the concept and like following it to its bitter end, which might be in an object, it might be in a video, or it might just be in a conversation. So like with that, actually, I find it, my time here in Athens has been rather interesting, because I've been trying to figure out what is my project? Is it a social project? Is it an activist project? Or should I have an artwork by the end of it, or should I have a text, or do I need to give an important speech and have people listen to me? And I've kind of been doing some combination of both, trying to just speak with as many people as possible and maybe like understand what other people think of the situation here more so than like project my opinion onto it. So maybe what I'm doing here mostly is like learning a lot from people and learning a lot from just like experiencing this situation.
Can I say some really fuzzy thoughts on the whole thing, because it's
Fuzzy
probably
thoughts
not.
are great.
Huh?
Fuzzy thoughts are great.
Yeah, it's probably not going anywhere, but it's just some, inner thoughts that keep popping up when discussing things like freedom and free. Because to me, it's like discussing the concept of truth. It actually doesn't mean anything. It's a non-concept. It's most of all, it's completely hijacked. Freedom and free is something that doesn't mean anything anymore. Even if you go to the hardest version of the loss of freedom in the world, the problem is not the lack of freedom in a way, it's who defines reality. And when you talk about freedom, you always suppose that someone is giving to you this freedom, someone is passing you these rights, these civil rights, someone is giving you something. And this is totally wrong from the beginning. So it's something like truth in a way. Objectivity,
I think you're
and
really
it's
right.
it's totally messed up,
But
and they're looking, I
when
think, in the wrong place. When we're discussing freedom and free, we always have to think the context. I mean, free and freedom in the internet is something so chaotic,
yeah.
because sometimes very something really cheap means almost free in the internet, like Spotify. When you play a song from a band, they get nothing. They get 0.027 cents. This is free, almost. It's almost nothing, which means it's free. So you have to always think of the context you're speaking about when you think for freedom and free. And I'm just thinking about the definition that William Burroughs gives to freedom. It's the capability to develop all the possibilities for happiness, which is great for me. It still sounds great after all these years. It's just that. I mean, I just thought that it's completely hijacked from power.
Yeah.
A word, a
I mean,
concept.
that's my conclusion as well. But and maybe this is due to Hannah Arendt. I'm not ready to let it go.
Yeah.
Like somehow, and the fact that it's like it's completely hijacked, and on a conscious level, we recognize that it's hijacked. Like when you see this stuff. I can't find the presentation anymore. But like all this advertising stuff with free, and it's all red, and it's all very
mantra.
flashy.
Yeah, be free.
And it's like nobody buys into that, but they do. I mean, that's why it's still used, and that free is so often used in an effective way still. And on the other hand, like we enjoy a lot of freedoms that we don't acknowledge. So maybe that's what I'm most interested in, is kind of like negotiating those feelings of like there still is a maybe we haven't killed it yet. Like
Yeah, I agree with you, but maybe that's the problem, that you are free and someone is telling you you can't be free, and that creates this immense absurdness inside your mind, that you have to reach that state where you're going to be free, but no one tells you that you are free anyways, and you don't expect from someone to give you rights. I mean, it's a discussion with no ethical gravity. That's the problem. They have taken out all the ethical gravity from the conversation on freedom. So when let's say they talk on freedom, you have to talk about duty. The duty to try to be equal, to try to be honest. I don't know, I sound really like a hippie, which I'm not. But it's a problem. When they talk about freedom, you have to look to totally different direction, I feel.
I think maybe we don't realize freedom unless we're deprived from freedom. We don't realize that at the moment, us, group here, we have a lot of freedom. We are very free. So maybe we don't realize what freedom really means unless we lose it then.
Those are different levels of freedom, actually. Compared to being in a war zone, you're physically not free. But if you're here, you compare it with the war zone, you are free. But they're completely different levels of freedom that act in your everyday living. So.
And with just like on an individual level, it's. I mean, we have so much potentiality that we can never use. That our possibilities are always like exponentially. Yeah. That our possibilities are always tremendously greater than what we do with them. So maybe for me it's kind of a reminder that we have a lot of potentialities that we let get funneled into this fake hijacks.
Yeah.
But something else that has occurred to me as far as this dichotomy within the notion of free.
Πάτη, θες να λίγο πιο δυνατά γιατί δεν ακούω τα παιδιά από εκεί.
I was just saying that something that occurred in my mind when talking about your project with dialectics within the term free, that it does exist, it does appear in the English language, that you use the same term to explain the individual freedom, the freedom of the human being, with free of charge, that explains some object that you get for free within a capitalist system. It doesn't appear to be such in all the languages in the world. So, like in Greek or in other European languages, we use different terms to explain those. And maybe it's also interesting to think about how this linguistic turn has occurred in countries like America or England, where capitalism is at its height with its good and bad sides, or whatever sides you want to call it. And what does it mean, really? And how it's within those systems and within those structures that both economics and linguistics are developed, how it works within that, and what it means for those societies, those spaces, and what it means for spaces like this. Because even though, for example, in Greek, they don't seem to be the same word, you still use the lack of individual freedom, it's still apparent in many ways. So there are a lot of like paths that you can really go and study within this research, I suppose. But it's really interesting how it does exist within few languages. It's within the same notion of the same word, and it does hijack totally the notion of the individual freedom to just the illusion of giving products, customs away for free. And in other languages it doesn't exist, but still individual freedoms are not there or are limited. Or I just wanted to bring the dimension of the linguistics into play, to how it works with the financial systems and economics. Do you have any comments about it?
That's something I did think of a lot. Like, why is it the same in English, the same word in English, and it's not in French or German? Two separate words for these different notions. And so far, I'm just finding that it's bigger than I had expected. That there are more offshoots for me to go into than I had really anticipated this project having. But yeah, and also the use of English internationally and like in a globalized sense, and what does that mean? That we're speaking English here in Athens, and it allows us to communicate in hopefully a meaningful way, but it's also this like ever presence of English language.
If there are no more questions, maybe we can make it less formal. So just move to the bar, and then we can talk with Rosemary and have some drinks. And there are beers and raki for you. So
Thank you.
thank you very much for being